Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. We're going to be doing some learning today, friends. We like to think you're always learning, but also enjoying when you're here with us. But maybe a little bit of both today. So
yeah, hopefully they're
sounds like an open-ended topic.
They're yearning to learning.
Yearning to learning. We are extension professionals, right? It says that in the intro. So we have to do some learning that, but hopefully these will be useful learning and you'll be famous at parties for your knowledge. That's what I think.
Or ostracized at parties, either way. People may avoid you.
Listen, if you're ostracized at a party, let us know.
You're at the wrong party.
Parties. Yeah, you're at the wrong party. You got to find your people.
You got to find the garden party. The garden party is where you want to be. Safe friend and enter.
Well, we thought we would, we talk a lot. We use a lot of vocab words on this podcast. And we were like, it'd be fun to maybe dive into some of those, botany vocab words that we throw around. I've got a few fun ones that are probably not something you'll use in your everyday life, but you might. And also you might win a Jeopardy question.
You should use them in your everyday life.
The daily double might be something that you'll answer with one of mine, but also just, some concepts. I know we throw a lot of those words around. So we just thought, hey, let's just have a little learning, a little botany session.
Words
with you guys.
Words with friends, words with plants.
Plant people talking botany? No way. Who would have saw that coming?
People.
Ooh, I like
I'll tell you my favorite one that is not actually a part of this definition, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. The day I learned that plants have something called a megaspore mother cell was like the day I was like, TM, that is my band name. But yeah, that exists. And if you wanted to have a rock band named Megaspore Mother Cell, you can be in my rock band because I have no actual musical talent.
Mother Cell.
Yeah.
You just gave away your idea, Alexis. Now everyone's going to go out and just use that.
I'm an extension. We're all about sharing.
Yeah, Ray.
Sharing.
Yeah.
I did technically say TM, so.
Trademark. Yeah. So are you going to explain what that is? I mean,
no, that one's on the list. I just wanted everybody to know I had it as a
base. But it's on there. Now everyone's going to have to go look it up. They're probably doing that right now as they're listening to this. So it does sound like a rock band.
That'll be our Instagram post.
Probably a late 90s.
Instagram post.
What is definitely a band name? Megaspore Mother Cell.
Exactly.
Alex. Ken.
It's a 4-piece band with lots of electrification and neon lights. Brett, that's what it is.
Well, all right, who wants to go first?
I have a little set of them.
Love it.
So I think one of the ways that you can take, if you're interested in trees or you're interested in shrubs or any of the plants, a typical way that a lot of times we'll identify those is by looking at the leaves. And when you look at the leaves, there's different terminology that people will use to describe them. And so I thought I would give you some of those terms. And so starting from the area off the plant that it's coming off of the plant, that little thing that you might want to call the stem of the leaf, the little nibbin that connects the main part of the leaf back to the plant, is the petiole. And so last time we were talking about crushing petioles and getting the juice out and putting it in a meter to see about nutrition.
Tissue testing.
So that's the petiole. It's not a stem. It's a petiole. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As you move up the petiole, the extension of that through the leaf, in many cases, it's that kind of central structure of the like actual leaf part.
The vein.
It's like the central vein we call the midrib. And then coming off of that midrib are these veins. So the veiny structures are called veins in this case. So you have the midrib, the veins. Now, the thing about those is like the petiole could be different colors. It could have a different characteristic that could be used to describe to tell one thing from another. The vein might be a particular color or thickness or whatever. And the veins might come off in different orientations. So they can be kind of slightly alternated or they can be, different angles, whatever. The edge of the leaf all the way around, if you were to take and trace the whole outside of it, we call that the margin of the leaf. So, people on the margins of society or on the edges of society, the edge of the leaf is the margin of the leaf. And that's a big one that you'll see for people to differentiate. And so You'll see if it's completely smooth, if it's toothed, if the toothing might have a particular characteristic. It could be deeply what is the word
Lobe.
here?
Lobed or
Lobe.
two.
Yeah, lobed or serrated or whatever.
Mhm.
It can, that is another way. And so when you look at tree identification, sometimes they'll give an indication that of a deeply lobed margin or something like that, and they're just talking about the edge. And then you go out to the tip. The spaces between between the veins on the leaf are called the lamina. I don't really see a whole lot of that in identification, but
No, we don't use that
sometimes.
too often.
But yeah, so petiole, vein, midrib, margin, and vein. Those are some of the big ones that I think people use to
And if you've ever
describe
done a leaf
leaf.
collection in
Mm-hmm.
school, this is eminently important, or should have been eminently important to you. I don't know, Brett, is this, you guys, is this the most common way when people are trying to figure out something, identify something? Is this one of the most common ways that they do it? Look for the leaves and some of these features, Brett? It seems like one of the things I look for first.
I think so. I think it depends on what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And
Because
time of
like,
year.
yeah, it depends on the time of year. Depends on how close you're able to get or want to get.
Yeah.
But like, you can also tell things from like the shape or structure of the plant itself.
Mhm.
Like maple trees tend to grow like maple trees as compared to a ginkgo. And that's a silly thing to say, but like, people who are good at trees, they can see it from a long distance
Oh,
away.
yeah.
They can just
Mhm.
tell. And so, like, for instance, you may think all pine trees look like pine trees, but if I'm driving by and I see an eastern white pine versus a Virginia pine, it's immediate. Like, from a long way off, I can tell the difference. And we were at Udell recently, and there was uh, a cultivar of white pine that had extremely short needles, which of
Mhm.
course I was like, bonsai immediately, please. But also it was like, it was a little disorienting because it just didn't look, you could just tell something didn't look right about it. The color was
Yeah.
right, the growth habit was similar, but the needles, it felt different. So anyway, yeah, I think the leaf shape is one of those where you can, especially if you're like, I'm not sure if, it could be this or it could be this, you might move in closer and see, oh, okay, I can see the margin on this one is clearly this.
Or like it's an oak. So oaks are a good example. A lot of people can identify an oak or a maple, right?
Hmm.
Those are a little more intrinsic for those of us who grew up in around deciduous forest. But you don't know what kind of oak. And so then you
Hmm.
can look at the leaves,
Exactly.
because there's a lot of different leaf shapes in oak, same with maple. Um, but
And a lot of
you can at least get
hybridization
down
within
to,
oaks
yeah,
makes me
You know,
mad.
and maples.
in landscaping, we didn't look at really the leaf itself first. In landscape design, I worked a little bit in commercial landscaping. When I was first getting started, is Brett, you mentioned just the form of a tree, the general
Mhm.
form. There's a big difference between a weeping willow and a Colorado blue spruce, and it's physiological and its mental impact on you and the landscape and how that affects design. But
Mhm.
just the form of a tree, there's all of these terminologies that will describe the basic, whether it's lanceolate shape, the form, columnar, a globe
Mhm.
shaped, whatever. There's this whole vocabulary just to describe not the leaf shape, but the
The
overall
actual tree
Form.
shape.
appearance. Yeah,
Yeah.
weeping, whatever. Yeah. But there's it's got its own vocabulary list just for the shape of the general
Mhm.
tree, and I think that's pretty cool, and
Mhm.
it's kind of a big deal for landscape
And
architects
I
and
will say,
designers.
if you're like, wow, how do people learn all of this? This is so much to intake. Please remember, it took us years of these for Ray and I, years of studying and have degrees in it. For Brett, it's just years of nerding out over
Love
tiny
and
trees.
Curious
care. Yeah.
character.
But it's
Yeah.
not something you need to remember overnight. More along the lines of making you aware that these things exist so that when you hear them, you're like, I think that, a petiole, I think that has something to do with the leaf, right? And, that
And
will be helpful.
Yeah, and
some trees
between a
patiole.
book or like an app or something that you have with you, like,
Mhm.
it's very common for people who are doing identification and stuff to have stuff with them, either notes or
Mhm.
to have a book. It's where you can compare and look and
Mine's in my
see it. So it's
car.
not, yeah, it's not like people are just like, everybody's just walking around with this vocabulary of all these different
Oh,
things, but
yes, that was the red oak that is native to
yeah,
Nah, I got a tree ID book in my car I can
taste the
key
leaf a
out, like
little. The tannin content suggests Quercus
grown in
rubrum.
more acidic soil, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I got
so that's my leaf shape quick tips. I have some other leaf ones too, but even just being aware that like the difference between like an ash leaf and
mm,
a hornbeam. You know, like some people might confuse those if they don't have any idea what they're doing. But if as soon as you look at it a little bit more closely and know what you're looking at, there's kind of some similarity. I mean, there's some
A
different,
leaf versus a
they're
leaflet.
different.
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah, I was gonna
Yep.
say.
exactly.
Yeah. Which it's kind of tough. You're like, oh, leaves, that's pretty straightforward. That's a leaf on a tree. No, it's not, because is it a leaf
No,
or a
that whole
leaflet?
thing is
Yeah.
the entire leaf. Like Kentucky coffee
Yeah.
tree, the quote
Yeah.
unquote leaf is like 4 foot long. It's the leaflets
Yeah.
that are the small
Yeah.
So
things.
you all are leading me into this, and we're just going to end up talking about trees the whole time. But
That's fine
the
too. Yeah. I'm good with
so what Ray and Alexis are talking about is the difference between a simple leaf and a compound leaf. And so a simple leaf, the leaf comes directly off of the branch of the tree, and it's just usually a single little leaf that comes off. It's a simple leaf, hence the name simple. The compound leaves, there is a central axis, I guess, a central. It looks like a sort of a stem, but it is actually all that whole thing, and all of the little sub leaflets that come off of it are all one big leaf.
Mhm.
it. Mhm.
They all come off of
Technically
one
speaking.
main petiole.
Leaflet,
Yes.
That
yeah, leaflet doesn't come from, is it a leaflet doesn't come from a node, it comes from a stem, and a true leaf has to come from a node. I know
Yeah.
it gets confusing in there when you dig too deep into the weeds.
And
So,
the reason, I mean, part of the reason that matters, or that as far as growth habits and stuff like that, is that new branches are going to come primarily from a bud at the base of that compound leaf.
yeah,
There's not going to be, 6 or 8 little branches that are going to come off of that leaflet in the same way. And so, um, but like black walnut is an example, black locust.
mhm.
I just said one. What did I just say?
You guys are talking about the coffee tree. There's like
What
shoemakes,
did I compare to the
yellow
carpinus?
oh, I don't remember which tree you compared it.
ash
Hornbeam
trees,
and
An ash. I think it
ash.
mentioned it was an
ash,
ash. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But anyway, so that's sometimes it still fools me, because especially in the early part of the season when shoots are extending and stuff's growing and it still
Mhm.
has a greenness to it, it kind of can look like it. So yeah, it's
And then you
kind
have
of an interesting
double
piece.
compound leaves. We get
Yeah.
crazy up in here,
Pinnate
And the
guys.
nature,
compound,
you can
bipinnately,
have
yeah.
ones that look more like your palm, rather than the
Pomehea,
long
buckeye
skinny
trees looking
ones.
at you.
So anyway, simple leaf versus compound leaf. Take a look at the margin, and with that, you can pretty well identify a whole lot of stuff.
Sure.
Mhm.
What
Good
other stuff we
stuff.
got? I have one written down that I don't have an answer to, but I can pull you all on.
Alexis threw out a term and did not explain it. So that's the rule of this episode. If you throw out a botany term, you have to explain it.
Well, you
Okay,
all.
well,
Where
I
you
I
said
have one.
deciduous,
Okay,
but
Alexis.
that may not have been yours, but yeah.
Okay, well, I can do you want me to cover deciduous?
This is
Deciduous
a
is
little.
just the plant loses its leaves in the winter. It's
Yeah.
like the
There you
easiest
go.
way, right? So we have like
Boom.
conifers,
Yeah.
yes, that keep their needles, or we have some, like trees that'll keep their leaves, shrubs that keep their leaves,
Yeah.
through winter. Boxwood, for an
Yeah.
example, versus a maple, an oak. We keep going back to because those are easy, but they lose their leaves in the winter, so they're deciduous. So you might hear like, oh, it's a deciduous forest region, meaning majority of the forest loses its leaves. It's naked in the wintertime. So that's deciduous. That wasn't one of mine. I was going to talk about one that
So can I briefly interject,
yeah,
because I'm always curious
yes.
about the origin of words. So the deciduous comes from a
Mm.
very linear, the Latin word deciduous, meaning
Mm.
tending to fall or falling down or off. So it's more of the physical description rather than anything
Uh-huh.
botanical. And apparently, at some point, they used that
Leaf
term to
fall.
describe things like antlers and baby
Mm.
teeth and other stuff that just falls out periodically.
Deciduous teeth. That's strange to
My
me.
adult hair,
Deciduous.
deciduous. Goodbye.
Deciduous. It has fallen.
Anyway, so
I'm gonna
what
start
was your
using that
term?
more and dare.
Yeah.
Oh well, if I feel like it's timely because some of you out there might be doing some cover cropping either for the summer because you're sick of the heat and the garden and no shame there, or going into winter you might be wanting to put some cover crop down. And so a term to be familiar with, especially there, but also if you happen to have some black walnuts on your property, is a term called allelopathy. And I think we've
Oh,
brought this up before in some older
Mhm.
episodes, but this is basically something that the plant does, this organism does. It releases these biochemicals through the root system to prevent germination of other plants that aren't itself. So a black walnut can tolerate its own juglone, which is its allelopathy. Rye, the reason I bring it up for cover crops is rye has some allelopathic things that can be used for weed suppression. So that's a way it's used in cover crops. But to also say, maybe you put in a rye cover crop, you mow it down, roll it down, whatever you do to terminate it, you can't go in and direct seed your carrots into that for a couple weeks, because those chemicals in the soil will prevent that germination. So that's one that I always kind of have to keep in mind. You can go in with transplants, things like that, but seeding is usually off limits. Now, some like the black walnut, there's plants that are very sensitive even if you go in as transplants. So tomatoes are very sensitive to black walnuts. If you plant anywhere within that canopy zone, you're going to have some problems. They are very unhappy with the jug loan. But yeah, it keeps competition down for those plants and allows basically only their offspring to germinate and grow. So
so
it's pretty cool.
just another little etymological
Yes.
word thing. Allelopathy, combination of allelon and pathos, sometimes artfully translated as mutual suffering. So that
Seems about right. Yeah.
it has this effect on the other, this idea of affecting other plants.
I feel like if there's anybody out there who is a pastor or someone who marries people, figure out how to work that into some, marriage stuff. Like, don't have an allelopathic marriage. I
Not
like
a
it.
good thing.
Or if you
Not a good
do,
thing.
ensure that your partner is strong enough to grow through it.
It's a growth opportunity, but
don't
not
be the
necessarily a good
black
one.
walnut to your partner's tomato.
Mm.
Yeah, and there's some really cool extension information on the susceptibility of different plants to those compounds and plants that
Mhm.
inhibit competition around it, and pay particular attention to that because some like garden crops are much more affected by that than other crops, and you
Mhm.
can usually find that information readily available online from your local extension service.
And
So
hopefully
check
use
that
it to
out.
your own benefit. Like, that's
Yeah,
the rye both has allelopathic tendencies, but it also like physically can cover the soil like a mulch, right? So it's a double whammy there if used properly and
yeah.
with the right crops. So I like to get all the bang for the buck that I can get. Okay.
I like it.
So many of these botany things is, on the surface when we start to talk about these things and I really start to think about them, they like get progressively more complex. We started talking about leaves and then it got progressively more
We're like a
complex. You talk about
petiole, a
yeah,
double
petiole. Yeah.
compound.
It's, yeah. And then we just kind of branch out, no pun intended.
Heyo.
And we just go deeper and deeper down the Greek naming rabbit hole or whatever,
Mm.
the
Mhm.
Latin
We've entered our
naming hole.
mutual suffering.
I
Yeah.
had so many flashcards, like just
Yeah.
like a stack this thick that I took everywhere with me, and in any downtime I had to go through the flashcards. So like no one's expecting you to memorize them overnight. But again, you could be really cool at parties if you know some of these things. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Good stuff.
Mm.
I was trying to think of one. I was thinking of a couple, but one of the big concepts I think a lot about, and especially in landscape plants and commercial fruit and vegetable crops, is this concept of monoecious or dioecious. Monoecious
Mm,
meaning male and female flowers are on the same plant. It can be self fruitful, which is oftentimes the case, or it may not be self fruitful. In a lot of cases,
apples.
it is. Yeah, sometimes it's compatible with itself, sometimes it's not. But the main thing to remember: male and female on the same plant. Now, the on the other end of that, you have dioecious, meaning separate male and female flowers on separate plants, and that's a really important concept. And I was like, well, what's a practical example of that? Well, we were talking about asparagus, and it just dawned on me that's a great example of where a crop was totally changed because it was dioecious. And I'll give an example of that. Old asparagus plantings in the U.S. were like old standard varieties, heirloom varieties like Martha Washington, which were made up of both male and female plants. They were dioecious, but that was not a good thing because then they would produce viable seeds. They'd go into the
Mhm.
soil, and just you had all this asparagus that got too thick,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and it just crowded itself out over time, and it just sort of was not a desirable situation. Well, now I try to stress that if it's fine if you want to grow an heirloom asparagus, you can do that and manage it a certain way. But I encourage people to pick one of the newer, like male hybrids. Male because they have
Mhm.
bigger spears, and they don't, waste any energy on reproductive parts, which is, the female plants. But they're all male hybrids, and the reason for that being they're very carefully bred and selected to be mostly, not all, but mostly male hybrids, in that they will then not produce seeds that will overcrowd the patch over time. And
Mhm.
all of that, the rise up of asparagus and home gardens, a lot of that was due to the fact of manipulation of monoecious and dioecious concepts.
Hmm.
There's a lot of monoecious concepts in your garden. That's thing, and that's a very good thing. Where male and female flowers, they'll cross, and you'll have crops like corn and things like that that will pollinate easier because it
Mhm.
has male and female on the same plant. A lot of the vine crops, cucumbers, squash, things like that, all monoecious. But that's a really cool, powerful concept, and it also translates to landscape plants. And I guess
Mhm.
the classic example there,
Ginkgos.
ginkgos. What else? Like hollies. If you want beautiful holly
Mhm.
berries, you got to have the blue girl
Female
and the
plant.
blue girl holly. The old standard varieties, or you have to have a male and female if you want the berries. But in landscaping as well as food production, this concept of monoecious and dioecious, really important concept, and plant breeding really super important also.
Mhm.
But it's kind of cool that, and you could go far down that rabbit hole, and I'm careful not
Yeah,
to go too
perfect and
far.
imperfect flowers, like
Yes, it goes really, really far down that rabbit hole. But what other things, I guess,
Well, so
talking about
the way that I remember that is that mono like one, that
Mhm.
it takes one to tango if it's monoecious. If it's dioecious, it takes two to tango. In other
There you
words,
go.
you need two different plants to. But
Yeah.
it gets to the point of like the usable or desirable portion of the plant for us is kind of in some cases at odds with
Mhm.
the innate whatever you want to say logic of that plant's life. The plant wants to grow to to produce viable
Reproduce.
offspring, and if you have just male asparagus, there's not going to be any offspring, and that for us is a good thing.
I
Yeah.
have a great example of this. I might have told you all before, but when I worked in Boyle County, down the street trees, uh, 20 years ago were ginkgos planted, all male
Mm.
ginkgos. And they worked with
Mhm.
the UK arborists. They planted all male ginkgos. They were male for 10, 15 years. And slowly but surely, those plants changed to some of those plants, not all, changed to female because they want to reproduce. And so the plant by itself, which I mean, it's crazy when you think about it, right? Like it's just not something that happens in everything, but plants and certain animals do this. It changed sex because it said these are all
Mhm.
males. They somehow know that there is a word for that. I don't know that word. I'll have to look that one up. But slowly but
Called
surely,
toxic
those
masculinity.
Yeah. That's it.
maybe it's toxic femininity because they're turning female.
It was
We
so
learned
toxic that some of them needed to get out.
Yeah,
we
they were
learned
like,
about it
"Oh,
in
men,
Jurassic
there's too
Park
much
with
men
frogs.
here." But those plants started to turn female, and no one believed. They were
Mhm.
like, "Oh no, they've always been female," and I'm like, "No, that's not true. This happens." So it is. It's just kind of
Whoa.
wild when you think about it.
Well, even when you plant the male hybrids like asparagus, there will be, I don't know, 0.5%, 1%. There's a certain percentage that's acceptable. You can't make it 100% of one thing. So there is a low likelihood
Mhm.
that there'll be some, crossing and viable seed production,
Mhm.
in an asparagus bed. But it's hard to get like guaranteed 100%. But in your case, it's a little different where there was a kind of a spontaneous changeover. Um, yeah, and you can talk about like hermaphroditic plants and qualities that come from that, and like I said, go deep down the breeding rabbit hole of this,
Mhm.
because plant genetics have always been pretty fascinating to me when you start talking about things like heirlooms and what does that mean, an
Mhm.
heirloom. And the only thing that makes an heirloom is, I know I'm cheating, I'm going into a different concept, I
I
realize
love it.
this,
Bring it. Give
but
it
the
to me.
heirlooms are fun to me. They kind of relate to this conversation because all an heirloom is something that's developed in such a way that it's become self-stable over time, typically without intervention. It has a genetic pool that's very stable. It's
Mhm.
developed very stability over time. It's typically 50 years or more older, and that seems kind of arbitrary to me. It's a plant that's, has a genetic pool that's 50 years
Well, yeah,
plus.
because like, how
It's
old
kind
is,
of
like, a big boy
arbitrary.
tomato?
Yeah, but it has to be at least that old.
When does a big
And
boy
Mm.
tomato become a big man tomato?
yeah, big man. When does it grow up? But yeah, heirlooms are kind of cool like this because they have this genetic stability. But does that mean when you have tomatoes with other hybrids in the garden, is it going to maintain 100% stability as an heirloom?
Mm.
Absolutely not.
No.
If you left them together for 50 more years, all these different
You have a
varieties
different
with your
plant.
heirloom, you would have slow genetic dilution
Mhm.
over time.
Mhm.
But for the most part, it's very stable. You don't have F1 generations where you're breeding two distinct parents to get a hybrid offspring. That's the whole F1 generation
That's your
of breeding.
that's your
But yeah,
poodle and your I always use the dog reference. That's your poodle and, your golden retriever making a golden doodle. That's your F1 is your golden
yes. But
doodle.
if you breed that dog to another dog, you're not going to get a very predictable outcome. You're going
Yeah,
to get a genetic outcross.
And
But
feel
yeah.
free
yeah,
to go to your local humane society's listings to see the byproducts of that type of breeding.
they will be there. But yeah, it's kind of cool. This monoecious, dioecious, and plant breeding. That's where I kind of nerd out, and I kind of enjoy kind of
Mhm,
looking, into this because it kind of goes to my apple background. When you talk about like tree fruit
mhm.
crops, it
So
gets
does
really interesting.
does open pollinated fit in there?
Yeah, open pollinated, yes.
Is it just a
Uh,
synonym or is it?
tomatoes are interested when you say open pollinated because by the time the flower actually opens, it's just about pollinated almost instantly, and then no other pollen can get in that particular case. It's open pollinated, but at the same point the plant kind of keeps its stability. In the case of, like we were talking about, heirlooms, it's almost instantaneous pollination, then it's done. It
Yeah.
accepts nothing incoming, but there is a chance. There's always an air and
Well,
chance
that's
you're
it.
going to get a
It
golden doodle.
reminds me again we were talking about earlier with like the pollination, the reproduction being the thing that like even within our goals, the goal of growing an heirloom or open pollinated tomato
Hmm.
is twofold. It's to grow a delicious tomato, and it's also to produce seeds that we could theoretically save to then grow
Viability,
again.
true to
With a
type.
hybrid
Yeah.
tomato, we're literally just growing it for that fruit, and we're done, and we're getting
You
seeds again
can't
the next time.
save. Yeah, you
Right.
can't save because then that would be like an F2 generation. You would have known parentage from the F1 producing a very, predictable offspring. But
Well,
beyond that, all bets are off, people.
and the reason why I think uh, it will produce viable seeds that will grow
Yeah.
into a plant. That's the thing that it's like
So
it's
will
not like
apple trees.
it's not like this is forbidden that you can't ever do
No.
this. But what with the hybridization stuff that where you're taking, and this is not genetic engineering. This is good
No.
old fashioned
Old
breeding.
school
Just
Just
breeding.
oh,
just exactly like the dogs. You put
yep.
two tomato plants in a room together, and not exactly, but put them in a room together and let the magic happen. And then they have little baby seeds that
Dioecious.
will have. But usually you'll have one that has some sort of trait that you want for the fruit, and then you'll have this other one that might have some other trait. It has terrible fruit. They're tiny, they're bitter,
Hmm.
they're whatever, but it's really good at resisting diseases or something like that.
Hmm.
And so then the offspring might look like it's in that case it's dad, which was the one that had terrible fruit and couldn't produce
Mhm.
stuff. And so that's why that to bring it home to me personally, that's why when we have a tomato growing in our compost heap and Annie's like, "No, we can't kill it." I'm like, "But why though?" Uh, it is not going to be anything remotely
Gonna
like
be an
what.
ogre.
Yeah, it's going to be terrible, and then it's
A
going to be
Franken tomato.
So anyway, I just had to get that off my chest. I've been hearing
Sometimes, Brett,
that.
though, it's like eating gas station sushi, Brett.
Roll the dice,
When you
baby.
you lose big. You have a plant that's not very good. But when you win, we've gotten some very good apple varieties that were totally from actual
True.
naturally occurring crosses. Now, what crossed, we don't know. But once you get a good one, Brett, you get a good one. So it's gas station sushi. But
That's
most of
right.
the time, yeah, you're absolutely right. You wouldn't want to try to plant the seed from a really good apple variety for the same reason. You have no idea what you're going to get from that, because at that point it's a random genetic cross. That's like trying to predict, what people's kids and grandkids are going to be like. You can't, because it involves outcrossing. But
So
It's
yeah,
the
that's a
Punnett
good point.
square.
Yeah.
Can we do a quick bonus lightning round of grafting terminology for apples, since we have
Mm.
and like
Yeah.
in
So
that example, the one that's really amazing, we don't know what crossed with what, but we really like it.
yeah, I guess
How would we turn that into more apples like that?
just to keep it real simple, you have top stock and bottom stock. Scion, which literally means child, that's the wood you would collect from a known variety.
And that would be the top stock.
That would be the little water sprouts, people call them, or whips, pencil thin or smaller. You pick some of those during the dormant season, February, March, and then you have known rootstock with its own qualities and a lot of the disease resistant package and things like that.
Mhm.
The anchorage that
Dwarfing.
all the ultimate size of the tree, Alexis, that's the biggest thing, comes from the
Mhm.
rootstock. So the rootstock give certain qualities, but the actual variety comes from the genetic material, the plant material you collected from, in this case, let's say apple tree, the scion wood, Sion. My Appalachian, I have to spell that out because it sounds like
Scion.
I'm saying sign wood, SIG.
Scion wood.
It's scion wood, which means child, but you then would put that onto the root. There's a lot of different methods to do that,
You
but
graft
top
it
stock,
onto the
yep,
rootstock.
graft it on, and that's how you get true to top apple varieties, or most fruit trees are like that, to get true varieties. Otherwise, I mean, you would not know what you were getting. But yeah,
And this
grafting, that's how we get, known varieties.
And the same terminology is used in all grafting. So, like tomato
Yeah.
grafting and like melon grafting has become a much bigger thing because of root
Yeah.
knot nematode issues.
Really
So, they're getting
cool.
resistant rootstocks with heirloom, like they're getting resistant rootstocks, but grafting a
Mm.
lot of the times heirloom varieties onto those resistant rootstocks so that they get the heirloom and the benefit of the resistance. And the
Mhm.
melons, there's cases where it's happening with melons and stuff too, but it's the same terminology, scion and rootstock, no matter what it is. If it's grafting, it's always
Like
those two
tomatoes,
terms.
there's different types of grafting, like bud grafting or chip
Mhm,
grafting. I mean, but still the concepts are the same. You're,
mhm.
grafting one plant
Yeah, there's different
material
types
onto.
of grafting. So
Yeah, yeah,
very
there's
similar,
different
Yeah.
but if
types
you're
of grafting.
We're not going down that rabbit
No,
hole.
no,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah.
but,
But
yeah.
I
We've
will
got
say
some
that,
plant propagation stuff coming up, so
yes,
Oh,
but in
yeah,
case you
that's
are
true.
wondering on the tomatoes and stuff, yes, that does mean you're growing two plants for every
Mhm,
plant that goes in the ground. You are
mhm,
taking it and you're cutting it and you're putting the other one into it so that they merge together, all for it to grow for one season. That
mhm.
is how, and so that sounds like a lot of work compared to an apple tree that's going to last for a number of years.
A long
But
time,
that's
yeah.
how desperate people are to deal with some of the pest pressures
Yeah,
and disease pressures and other things.
Pretty
And it's
amazing.
becoming very common. And if you're good at grafting, you can get really fast. But
yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
nevertheless, it's a whole other step besides just dropping a seed in a dibbler,
Mhm,
in a
It's
dibble
just
mhm.
dibble tray.
botany. In the background is just
Speaking
botany doing
of
what botany does.
Speaking of tomatoes, I'm segueing here. I've
Look
got
at
another term for you because it happens a lot in tomatoes. Is another
Oh.
fun word. I'm liking the fun words as my botany term. I've got a
BLT.
really good one for you, but
Ooh, I
this one
like
is
that.
called
Bacon.
vivipary, which is such a
Oh,
fun one.
That's
Such a good
one that
mouthfeel.
really gets people excited, Alexis. It does.
Vivipary, and so if you
It gets people excited.
it gets the people going. So if
Literally.
you've ever cut
it sounds like a
into a
dressage
tomato,
horse.
and Vivipary has entered
It,
the arena. Um, I'm loving it. My next dog,
It's
Vivipary,
really
here
cool.
it
It's a
is.
cool one. That's a cool one. Yeah.
But we see it a lot in tomatoes. It can happen in a bunch of different things, but tomatoes especially, people tend to see it. So if you bring one home, you cut into it, and all of the seeds are starting to sprout. That is vivipary. And so you'll see. My favorite thing is when I see them all on like social media, and people are like, "These are them monster tomatoes, and they're GMO." And I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I'm giving a country accent. They could be
Do
Brooklyn. It doesn't
give us a Brooklyn accent.
A British
matter. I
accent.
will not be doing.
Give it a go. Just give it a try.
No.
Make it up to the people.
I can't. I'm too nervous.
For those listening, Alexis is turning a bright shade of red right now.
She's like, I have stepped in it, and Brett is making
Absolutely
it
not.
so much
Absolutely
worse.
not. I know. I felt bad. I was like, my accent comes out
look at
sometimes.
these.
But
Look
how
at
many times,
these monster
Alexis,
tomatoes?
tomato? How many times did you get people? It really gets people excited, and it does look very striking when you cut a tomato open.
It can
and
be scary,
things
like if you
growing
don't
in
know
it.
what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just the hormones
Yeah.
in those seeds that make them
Temperature.
right.
Yeah.
Temperature, a bunch of different things can kind of come into
Yeah.
that, and the seed says, "Hey, this feels like a pretty good place to start doing my thing." And they're even though they're not out because the seed probably really doesn't know if it's in a nice warm tomato that's a moist
Totally.
environment. It's warm. Thinks it's in the soil, right? So if you think of it that way, there's some other triggers that can go into it. But don't panic. You don't have a monster tomato. It's any plant can potentially do this. Any
I've
seed
seen it
can
in peppers
potentially do
before
this. Huh?
too. I've had
Have you in
peppers too
peppers?
before.
Yeah.
Peppers. Yeah. I've seen it in peppers
Like bell
before too.
peppers.
Bell peppers,
Solanaceous
yeah, that's
crops
right.
especially seem to be digging that but in the
Ready
summer.
to go.
Yeah, they're like, let's go, baby. We got one chance.
Yeah.
So
Endless summer.
vivipary, and
Let's
that
go.
one will make you seem really smart when your aunt
Vivipary.
posted on Facebook and is freaking out. You can be like, actually, it's a vivipary.
It's technically the dressage horse vivipary caused that to happen.
Some of these terms are pretty wild, and that's a good one. That's a really good
One
one.
that we said earlier that we did not clarify that may be worthwhile when we were talking about leaves and is the word node.
We use that
One
a
of the
lot.
most important concepts. Yep.
Yes.
And this is not social network analysis where, for instance, Ray knows a lot of people, and so he functions as a node within that. But it's kind of similar. It's a point where lots of different things can and do come off.
Yeah.
But
Point of
I didn't
differentiation.
know that was used that way.
yeah,
I'm learning about pop culture things.
yeah, social network analysis, baby. That
Venn
you have
diagrams and all
these
that.
things where, like, like for instance, Alexis, you are now a node between the extension agent community and also the like kind of campus employees community or something like that.
Gotcha.
But on a
Okay.
plant, which is cool, always cooler.
Totally.
Generally it's like where you see that the leaves or buds are attached to a plant, that's sort of like a node. And so what you'll also hear along with that is the internode, which is literally just the space between nodes. And where you can observe that is that, like, you'll have a branch, particularly if a tree is growing pretty quickly or a plant's growing pretty quickly, you'll have some leaves that are coming out of it, and then there'll be a space on the stem, and there'll be another leaf coming out of it, or another set of leaves or whatever coming out of it. So the nodes are where those leaves are coming out, and there will be at the base of that leaf, at the axil, is that right?
Leaf axil.
At the axil, this is the angled space between there will be a little bud that will often form that could become a new branch or whatever. But anyway, the space between is called the internode space. The actual area where it comes out is called the node. This is particularly important for things like pruning. It's also important for things like propagation, because you sort of want to pay attention to where the nodes are, because if you just sort of cut off a dead stick with no node or anything on it and put it in, it's not really necessarily going to do anything.
That node is your hub. It's your hub there's a lot of hormones located there that are just waiting to be given direction. And so, but what I mean by that is they can become roots, they can become a branch, they can become florals, they can become a leaf. There's a bunch of different things, and so the environment might dictate that, the plant, the species itself, but that's your little hub of all the good stuff.
Lots of cells that are just waiting. Yep.
Yeah, sometimes it's like a little bit of a swollen area, especially on trees. You'll notice like kind of these little swollen rings going up the branch, but yeah, that's your main hub of goods.
Also,
that affects everything on plants. I mean, it's crazy the form everything. Yeah.
Well, if you are, let's say that you or someone is somewhat of an amateur arborist, and you have cut off a tree limb and you just cut it off at a random spot, you will see, and you could actually see it in the bark. You can see it, but that it will often, if you just cut it in a random spot, it will die back, but only to a certain
Mhm.
point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then it will sort of cut off all the resources. And so you'll have a tip of that thing that you cut off. It's all brown and degrading and dried out, but the rest of it, it can send out new shoots. Cause again, at that node, there's all
Mhm.
this opportunity for stuff to grow. But that's why when you're pruning, it's recommended to cut up close to the node so that the tree can just wrap its tissue around that, heal it, and grow rather than having this dead
Wound
thing out
wood.
connecting
That's
to.
another use of those hormones. It says, "Ooh,
Yeah.
I have been injured. I must become a Band-Aid now."
I mean,
It's crazy.
if you ever wanted to make more plants more compact, whether it's a cardamom or your basil plant, well, all the only thing
Mm,
you're doing is manipulating that node internode relationship. You're pinching down to a stem that's got, two other little stems. You're pinching off the internode down close to the node, and then that one stem coming up makes two stems. So
mhm.
you get a more compact, and it's amazing. You do that with basil, and gosh, you got a 3 foot wide plant if you just keep pinching it when a stem grows up and you
That's
pinch
really
it down
big
to
in
a
cut flower world. Like,
is it? Yeah, I
I would
figured
say
that makes sense.
75% or more, that's probably really low, of cut flowers are pinched in some way,
Mm,
like, that's a term, and so we are removing that. It's called the apical meristem, which is that tip, that node at the top
Like
that is
the apex
it's
of
the
it, the
apex, yeah.
apical.
It's called the apical meristem. You're pinching that off, and that means to a node, and then that node is like, "Oh, I gotta grow 2." And so basically every time you pinch, you grow 2, and in cut flowers, we might do a pinch early before anything blooms, but then every time you're cutting, that's why we say, we tell people who are growing cuts to cut really deeply, because every time you're cutting, in theory, you're cutting it kind of back to a node. And
mhm.
you're doing a pinch with every time you harvest. And so you're pinching, and then boom, you get 2 stems for every 1 stem you cut. Obviously, the plant has to be healthy, blah, blah, blah. But like that's the basic theory. And so by cutting low, you get nice long stems when you get those next set of 2
Yeah.
stems come out.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
golden rule of pruning is always it's one thing over and over again, and it's this concept Brett brought up, nodes and internodes. But you always prune back to a living point. Well, what's a living point? Well,
Mhm.
that's a node. It's
Yeah.
a point where it has all these cells that are ready to do something.
Mhm. We
So
usually like,
yeah,
yeah, we keep it easy and we say cut back to a branch, or the trunk, which
main
is,
trunk. Yeah,
essentially one big node.
yeah,
But we'll say cut back to another branch, and but what we're saying is cut back to a node.
Right.
yeah.
Um,
A living.
is really
Yeah.
the science behind
Yep.
it. Mhm. Mhm.
And sometimes you can tell where the node is, and sometimes it's a little hard, like, especially if the
It's hard to
buds are really
node.
small. If it's out of leaf,
Yeah.
if you're cutting it in early, it
Yeah.
can be hard or it can be kind of intimidating. But like when I was pruning some red buds out front this year, and I cut them back to a node, but it was not it wasn't back to a branch. So for a while it looks dumb because it's a stick cut off with this little
Yeah.
bud at the end. Then
Mhm.
it grows and everyone
But
knows
you
that
look
I'm
for
the
the
one laughing
buds.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, but
Um,
and it's interesting in the apple world. When my father had an orchard in the east part of the state, even before I came along, I guess it wasn't uncommon if they were pruning apple trees. Go up and see the guys damage these bud areas with their thumb, and they were directing branching because they would damage that growing point area, and that trauma
Mm,
would cause branches to break in the direction of that trauma. And so they would just take their thumbnails and they totally controlled the growth of the tree with their thumbnail. They would
that's
cut
crazy.
branches, and when they wanted a bud to break to the left or right to direct, outward growing trees to get more sunlight penetration, he would just take his thumbnail up there and damage
Catch
that a
a
little bit. And
node.
finally I asked him and he said, "Well, that's what I'm doing." He said, "I'm, the auxins of the plant." And he like put it in terms a certain way, but I looked it up years later and that's what he was doing. He was kind of disrupting the flow and that
Mm.
area of plant compounds,
And
but
so
they just
it's
did it. Yeah.
so the branch is gonna go towards the wound because it's gonna, like, seal that, or it's gonna go
Uh,
away from
Part
it?
of it is with the flow of auxins. It has to do with
Mm,
that. Part of it is the trauma that I learned. So it's a combination of the two things together. And now they
auxins are
probably
those
didn't look at it
hormones I
in
mentioned.
term. Yeah, that's what the flow of hormones. They probably didn't look at it in botanical terms. They just knew that it
Mhm,
worked. So you
mhm.
can manipulate bud break, limb differentiation through that. I don't know, Brett, does that get into any? I'll be surprised if that didn't get into some bonsai kind of work
it
stuff.
does. There's actually this
Does it?
really fascinating podcast about so in bonsai you're generally when you're doing bonsai itself, you've got a tree that's already got most of its branch structure developed. But there's this whole problem of how do we get trees to the point where they would make really cool bonsai. And so there's these people who were they were out in Colorado doing some called Telperian farms. If we have any fans of literature, but they grew trees into finished bonsai, but in the process of that, they have to like basically try to get branches to pop wherever they want it to go.
Mhm.
He didn't
Mhm.
use the nail technique, but like there's things of where like you would take a particular shoot, and at a time of year where a tree had a capacity to put on a second flush of growth, you would remove something with apical dominance or reduce it in order to then drive energy back to be able to create buds in other
Mm.
places. You expose that to sunlight. You can also do things like or orient it, like the way that a branch is oriented will determine
And that's
how
manipulating that chemical. Yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
exactly because that's the thing that people don't necessarily understand about plants. I think sometimes is that there's no like pump that is moving things. It's
Mm-mm.
Mhm.
entirely this really interesting and beautiful network of like passive plumbing that is
Mhm.
happening where like up at the leaves the air blows across the leaf and it creates the tiniest little sucking, like sucking on a straw, that puts pressure on the whole
Moisture
thing.
loss, yeah.
Yeah, and then the exactly, the moisture loss up there is like sucking it up, so that pulls it up through the roots. And it's the same, and then the flow of how the chemicals move throughout the plant are in part determined on whether it's upright and vertical, whether it's out, whether it seems like it's the highest or whatever. And that there's all kinds of stuff, but it's a very common thing to try to, because we're trying to keep it small, to reduce that apical dominance, but also try to manipulate how and where buds come out. There's also they also do grafting and stuff like that too.
So
But
much science behind that, because if you go too much or too little, it doesn't work properly. If you go too much to the horizontal,
right.
and then you have water sprouts, because you lose the total apical dominance, even though the terminal bud's still present, because it messes up the gravitational flow of the auxins, which
Yeah.
is interesting. It's crazy,
It
and
also
proof we
has to do
manage
with
that a
how
lot.
old the tree is and how, like, vigorously it's growing.
Oh,
That's a part
mm,
of the equation across the board, like, I would be willing to prune something that's a little bit more vigorous and strong because I know it's gonna bounce back where but the part of the point I was gonna say with that was the guy who was talking about doing this, he was sort of called in as the tree whisperer at this farm to do a lot of pruning and stuff like that, and he had spent, like, 30 years in the nursery and landscape industry. So that's where he cut his teeth on just knowing how plants work and these kind of exactly like what you're
it's
talking about. I bet he's
fascinating.
familiar with the thumbnail trick.
But you'll see that they'll do limb spreading in orchards,
Mhm.
and that's more common in the old semi-dwarf orchard. It's still common, but part of that is you're managing density just with the angle of the branch being just
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
It makes a strong branch, but you're managing the angle just right to have minimal water sprouts, but also a strong branching angle. And there's a whole science behind that. That's pretty fascinating. It's
Yeah.
good stuff. Yeah.
It's even to the point like so if I'm growing a tree, and I'll stop talking about bonsai, but if I'm growing a tree and I want a branch to get thicker, what I want it to do is to elongate.
Mhm.
However, I might want that branch to come out from the tree and go downward and go up. But what I will do is I will shape the branch with wire, and then the tip I will always point back upward. And that is
Mhm.
Mhm.
enough to sort of stimulate that auxin production and trigger it to extend. And if I don't do that, it doesn't grow the same. It's very,
Yeah.
very cool.
That's, something like in vanilla production, so it will
Oh,
not form flowers unless the vine is upright.
huh.
And so you
Mhm.
can have like a really, beautiful vanilla and it's because it's a vine, right? It's kind of crazy. They don't always crawl, they can sprawl. And so if
Hmm.
you got one going down, it won't form any pods. But if you get it upright, those flowers will form and can be pollinated to create vanilla
Whoa.
bean. I know. Yeah.
What the
I
heck?
learned that. I was like, what?
Probably a similar type of concept that we're talking about, because that's the
Yeah,
way it wants to
it's the
be.
hormones
Yeah,
form. I guess it just knows the, plant has, a place to hold on and get
yeah.
light and nutrients and all
Maybe
that
it's
other
an
thing, but
indicator.
Man, that's
Botany,
cool.
just when you think you know it all, then you're like, "Oh, I'm just scratching the leaf axle." Just getting started, yeah. It's fun. Botany can be pretty fun. It can be kinda heavy at times because
Mhm.
it is
There's so
vocabulary
much
heavy.
vocab.
Yeah, but, the concepts themselves are pretty fascinating from a very practical standpoint as, just gardeners or commercial growers,
Mhm.
particularly for home gardeners, it's just, endlessly fascinating with how we get, fruit production or berry production or floral crops, or how do we make this basil thick or there's cut flower thick and full, and just all the
Mhm.
things that we've talked about today. It's pretty fascinating. It's
Yeah.
good stuff.
It's all
Good stuff.
realistic. That's what I like
Yeah.
as a gardener. I like the realistic ones, I mean, Megaspore mother cell sounds really cool, but, like, I'm not other than my sweet band that I'm gonna have, it's not super, relevant to making sure I can grow things well, right? But knowing that my cover crop can kill my seed with allelopathy, or, knowing what how to identify a black walnut, based on the leaf margin and the petiole and the compound leaf, so that I don't plant my tomatoes there and have allelopathy, is important and practical, right? So hopefully you guys got something beneficial out of that. If there are more terms that you're like, I have heard this, I don't really understand it, what is the difference between these? Please leave us. You can send us an email, that you can find that in the show notes. You can shoot us a message on Instagram at Hort Culture Podcast. Um, you can also leave us, as you're leaving us 5 stars, and say, I want more botany terms. Please tell me about XYZ. You can do that. It does help the show. I know it gets annoying. Every podcast I listen to always says that, but we say it for a reason. It does please the algorithm, and hopefully more people will find our podcast this way, and learn some new botany terms. But
And we're not
anyways,
like other podcasts. We're cool podcasts.
we're the cool podcasts. Yeah, we're the cool plant people. But
All plant
we
people are
appreciate you guys
cool.
being here with us, and we hope that you will. We hope that you'll contact us, and we hope you'll join us next time. Have a great one.